1,203 days ago, I made what might honestly be the most foolish decision of my life. You see, 1,203 days ago, I decided to start streaking. Sorry, I decided to start a running streak. To clarify. Yeah. And all that means is I vowed to run 1 mile, at least 1 mile, every single day, consecutively, outdoors. So not a treadmill, not in a gym. And you can tell from my stats that I've been able to do that. But do you want to know what 1,203 days ago was? January 1st, 2020. Despite that date and what was to come, I continued to run. I ran the rest of that year that I taught remote, then the following year while I was a simultaneous teacher. I ran the morning before I was named the Florida Teacher of the Year. I ran last year this week in Washington before meeting the President of the United States and the First Lady. I've run at 3 a.m. before getting on a plane, and I've run at 10 p.m. when getting home from traveling. I have run in the rain. I've run in 98-degree temperatures. Why? Why do I do this? Because I find joy in running. Find joy. That phrase has been a constant for me for the last few years, because that phrase reminds me that joy is something we chase. It is pursued, and it can be found. And I learned that lesson first and foremost from my 5th grade students. You see, I was about a year deep into my running streak in 2021, when instead of teaching my 22 5th graders in the classroom, I was navigating new territory as I taught both online and in person at the same time. And while I was teaching, it didn't take long for me to grow frustrated with that technology, right? Like, my sound would go out, I'd forget to share my screen, mute, unmute. It didn't matter. I was always doing the opposite of what I should have done. And apparently I was groaning every single time. And so around early September, I started teaching a core math lesson. And Isabella, who had been an online learner, had just transitioned to face-to-face learning and was now sitting in front of me. So I asked for some volunteers to share their work. And when I went to my laptop to look for my online students, they were all gone. They had dropped from my call for the 3rd time that day, and it was only 9:30. And I was like, oh, and the whole class was like, oh. And Isabella said, Mrs. Painter, were you guys doing that when I was on the other side? Yeah. It was a gut punch. And it was right there and then on that September day that my 5th graders, 10 and 11-year-olds, decided that we would not choose to look at what was going wrong, but we would choose to find joy, that we would make that our mantra. And it happened, and it followed us everywhere. You would hear a choral response of find joy anytime I needed to be held accountable or hold them accountable. You could hear it in the PE field, the art room, music, even in the cafeteria. You would hear a choral response of find joy. And that is how it was born in my 5th grade class. And you know, what my students taught me is that you cannot get rid of a negative thought by fighting it. You get rid of it by replacing it. You choose that response. And so I think about the beauty of that and how empowering it can be to show our students that mindset, that you can choose it, you can chase it, you can pursue it, and you can find it. And so finding joy is a mindset. It's something you choose to do intentionally. But not only that, it's also not about ignoring the negatives. I'm not naive. I think we need opportunities to vent, complain, commiserate, but we can't live there because that is toxic and unproductive. So after we've stated the hardship, the obstacle, the adversity, we need to ask ourselves, now what? What can I do now? What's within my control? Because when we face adversity, we can allow it to devastate us or elevate us. But we get to make that decision. And so finding joy and modeling how to find joy for our students is a way to actively show them how we get to create the environments in our classroom. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about teaching, right? That no matter what life is like outside your four walls, you get to create an environment that nurtures success, that breeds gratefulness, that's full of joy. And that's what we get to do. But I think what I love the most is that it's proactive, right? You find joy, not wait for joy to come to you, or when all circumstances line up, find joy. It's about a choice and a decision. So I made another pretty momentous decision 7,107 days ago, and that was the decision to become a teacher. So that's my teaching streak, 7,107 days. And in those almost 20 years now, my mission to serve students has not changed. That has been my joy. I teach for joy. And if I've learned anything over these last few years, it's that teaching is an act of service, right? We are called to serve students, period. Not serve students unless you're in a pandemic, or serve students unless your county votes on a curriculum you don't like. It's serve students. And I think the real value in continuing our teaching streak is not in the reward or the recognition, but in the person we become by finding the discipline, the courage, and the commitment to continue what we started. And so I use running as a time to reflect on my day and to process and to think about ways I can intentionally find joy. It's also selfishly an opportunity for me to get out of my house and away from my family. As a mom of 6 children, there are not many activities that I can claim to do that gets me out of the house alone. And so I honestly think it started one day when I said I was going to go run to the store. I never got the words "to the store" out of my mouth. They heard I was going to go run and they scattered like cockroaches. So I put a period and I said, yep, I'm gonna go run. Laced up my shoes, and I'm pretty sure in the beginning I just grabbed my phone and went outside and played Candy Crush and jogged back to the door. But it did eventually evolve into a passion. And so when I go out running, I use my running experiences the next day in my classroom as life lessons. So let's say I'm running late at work and I get home and my run gets pushed back later than I intended. The next day I tell my students that story and I tell them, sometimes in life you can't plan how things will go, but you still show up. Or maybe I'm running and my shoelace comes untied. And I stop and I tie it. So the next day's story sounds like, sometimes in life your plans get interrupted. But you stop what you're doing, you address the problem, and then you get right back up and keep going. But one day I stumbled upon the perfect analogy, applicable to both my students and my colleagues. I laced up my shoes and was getting ready to run, and the gray clouds came in. and it started to rain. And I knew I had two choices: skip my run and break my streak, or run in the rain. You already know what I did. So despite rain, I go out there and I run. Yes, I may have to wipe my eyes while running, and yes, my clothes may get wet and start to feel heavy, and yes, I may have to step into some puddles. But do you want to know what the quickest way is to get out of a dirty, muddy puddle that I didn't create, that just happens to be in my way, that I don't want to stay in? Well, it's not stand in the middle of it, take a picture, and post about it. It's not find out who hates the puddle equally as much as me and just talk about it. No, the quickest way to get out of a puddle is to keep running. Right? Keep running. Will it be messy? Yes. Will I get dirty? Absolutely. Will it be comfortable? If you've ever run in wet pants, you know the answer to that. Our passion and our dedication cannot change with our circumstances, but they may require us to work harder to find the joy in what we are doing. I often get asked, how do you do it? How do you run every single day? How do you find the time? I have the same 24 hours as you, Sarah. How do you do it? Well, it's a simple answer, and it's that I make it a priority. But before you react to that and have any sort of response, I want you to play a little game with me. So fist to 5, I'm going to call out an activity, and I want you to tell me how important that activity is to you to do every single day. And be honest, okay? Eating healthy. Right? Some 3s, some 4s. I don't believe all of you, but okay. All right, washing your hair every day consistently. Right? 2, some 0s. Right. Not that big of a priority. Brushing your teeth. I have a question about a 3 that I'm seeing right now. There may be a reason you leave the house or don't brush your teeth that day, right? There may be one. Last one. Putting on a pair of pants or any bottoms to cover your bottom half before you leave for work. Wow, you prioritize your pants, right? You would not leave your house under any circumstance without putting some bottoms on, right? That's running for me. That's teaching for me. I make sure that it happens consistently and with fidelity, because that is how much of an importance it is to me. But the funny thing about my running journey is that I was not a runner yet. In fact, in the beginning, I didn't quite love it. I just decided to do it, and I'm stubborn enough to just go with it even when I don't love it. So I believe it took me maybe an entire year to be able to run 1 mile without stopping. But I didn't give up. I stuck with it. I kept at it because I made a commitment. And I feel like teaching is like that sometimes, right? There are those that show up on Monday morning, copies made for the week, lesson plans a month in advance. They get an academic gain out of every student on their roster. And then there's those of us that bust our humps, tutor for free after school, work through our lunch break, lesson plans done 2 seconds before the kids walk in the door, and forget about making copies, right? Because sometimes our yet is our students and the academic gains that we expect from them. We will not always get the expected outcome out of our students because that academic gain for that student hasn't happened yet. But we might be the next link in the chain that gets them closer and closer to it. So I have a call to action for you. If you have something to write with or write on, or even the notes in your phone, I'm giving you permission to take those out. I want you to commit to the pursuit of a yet. Is it a student that maybe you haven't gotten the result you wanted yet. Is it a discipline? Is it a practice? Is it an outcome? Jot down what comes first to mind, because I guarantee you whatever it is that you're thinking of is that thing that you need to relentlessly pursue. I owe a lot of my consistency with running to the running community. You see, we have these scheduled meetups where we'll run together. And I actually love it. I feel like I run a better race when I have somebody who's experiencing the same course and conditions as me, right? And so I think teaching is a lot like that. We do so much better when we are collaborating or joining with others. Now, while I do believe there is a time and place to run with people who run similar distances as I do, which is about a 5K, that's 3.1 miles for non-runners. Imagine the impact on my running, though, if I trained for a half marathon and I only ran with 5Kers. Who are you choosing to collaborate with? And I want you to be thinking about that. Because I think finding people that hold us accountable while uplifting us and pouring into us are important equally. So I want you to be thinking about how can you join with others? Who's going to be on your team? So add to your notes, build to your team. Who can you collaborate with? And I want you to start at your school. And then I challenge you to go a little bit further. Is there someone in your district? Is there a half marathoner that you've been dying to work with? And then look at this room. Who in this room across the nation can you join with and collaborate to continue to grow and chase joy? My last and favorite piece of running is the ownership that comes with it. You know, as I run with my friends, there isn't a one of us that participates in a race, crosses the finish line, and then says, nah, I'm good, I don't need to know what time I crossed, right? Because knowing the time you crossed the finish line helps you analyze if your training plan worked, if the techniques that you put into play all year produced the outcomes that you wanted. And isn't that like teaching? So many people are scared of the data attached to their name. We need to own those numbers. And I think part of that ownership is recognizing when it's us that needs to change, right? If you are doing the same work over and over and not getting the results that you want, it may be time to consider if it's not the fish, it's the water. Spoiler alert, it's almost always the water, right? Because when we reflect on our practice, including student outcome data, but also knowing our practice, it helps us identify our areas of strength, but also opportunities for growth. And with that recognition is also realizing when you're running on empty and you need a reminder of your why, of your joy. You know, I think about when my car runs out of gas. Do I abandon it on the side of the road and get out and go get another car? No. I refill the tank. I recognize when it's empty and needs to be refilled. And I think that's what we need to remember to do. Not quit, not stop, but remember why we are doing what we are doing. So I want you to add to your notes. Is there a part of your practice that you need to own? Is there some data that you hide behind every once in a while? I always talk about giving context to your numbers. Justify, explain them. Do you teach ELL students? Do you have the gifted cluster? Is your assessment a diagnostic or is it summative? Because all of that gives context to the numbers you're producing. But let those numbers tell a story about you. And when you don't like the narrative that's being written, do something about it. So what can you do as educators, as teachers, to find joy for yourselves and for those around you? Model how to join with others. Demonstrate how to own your practice and live out the power of yet. And while you're doing that, don't be afraid to celebrate your accomplishments. It's not showing off, it's just proof it can be done. Recognize the struggles, but above all else, elevate the teaching profession. Because we know that a celebrated teacher celebrates students. A recognized teacher recognizes students, and an elevated teacher will elevate students. The best thing about being a teacher is that it matters. But the hardest thing about being a teacher is that it matters every day. So make every day one where you chase joy, pursue joy, and find joy. Thank you.